and hearing those words, just how sensitive this issue has become here, because a lot of people are wondering, well, what comes next, right? This was a racially motivated shooting in this community, in a predominantly black community, carried out by a white shooter. And that sort of brings us here to the sheriff's office, where, as you mentioned, there was a press briefing here with the sheriff, who gave us some of the information that a lot of people had. They wanted to know who this shooter was. He was identified as 21-year-old Ryan Christopher Palmetter of Clay County, about 30 minutes from where the shooting took place. He lives with his parents. A little bit more about these racist writings or manifestos and what was in them. As you mentioned there in the open, the sheriff describing this as the diary of a madman. And of course, we wanted to know how this shooting took place, how it transpired. The sheriff reluctantly showing us some of the video of that shooting from the surveillance cameras there. Didn't play all of it, saying out of respect for the families. We know this whole thing took place in about 11 minutes. We know the names of the 3 victims that were tragically gunned down. I asked the sheriff what he made of these writings, and you could just see how much this weighed on him to have to process this act of violence. He said, you know, despite the writings there, this individual was coherent. He knew what he was doing. He went to that predominantly and historically black college there. He could have carried out more violence there. It seems like a security guard was able to interfere, but he picked out these individuals because of the color of their skin and carried out this horrific act of violence. I believe we have a little bit more here from the sheriff that you can take a listen to.
The manifesto is quite frankly, the diary of a madman. He was just completely irrational. But with his irrational thoughts, he knew what he was doing. He was 100% lucid. He knew what he was doing. And again, it's disappointing that anyone would go to these lengths to hurt someone else.
Yeah, Lindsay, the other big question that was asked is, how did this shooter obtain these weapons? And at this point, it does appear that those weapons were obtained illegally. So the sheriff's saying, look, it's going to be hard for anyone to make sense of this senseless tragedy, but they are still investigating this heavily, as you mentioned. So we know the ATF, the FBI now involved in this investigation to try and figure out something to give answers to this community. We know that there's going to be a vigil later today where people from all walks of the community are going to gather to pay their respects, not only for the people lost, but to begin that lengthy healing process, as we've seen and reported time and time again as these tragedies unfold in different communities across the country. We know the road back after an incident like this can be very challenging for communities. We were out there at the scene where the Dollar General is, and it really is just sort of its own standalone store there. Outside of the large police perimeter, it is very quiet, it is very somber. So you know that a lot of people in this community, and frankly across the country, are definitely resonating with the tragedy here in Jacksonville, Lindsay.
So many disturbing details. George Solis, thank you. Joining me right now is Florida State Representative Angie Nixon, who represents the district where the shooting took place. Thank you for being with us. I'm so sorry that you're joining us under these circumstances for the entire community. I want to ask you, Governor DeSantis just spoke about the shooting a short time ago. Let's play part of it.
Florida, the state, and its people condemn the horrific racially motivated murders perpetrated by a deranged scumbag in Jacksonville at the Dollar General store. Perpetrating violence of this kind is unacceptable, and targeting people due to their race has no place in the state of Florida.
What do you make of that condemnation?
What I make of that condemnation is hollow statements. This is a governor who has done nothing but fan these types of happenings throughout our state. Look, at the end of the day, the governor has blood on his hands. He has had an all-out attack on the Black community. With his anti-woke policies, which we know very well was nothing more than a dog whistle to get folks up and riled up in the way in which it just happened on yesterday. As I listened to him for the first time with that statement, my blood is literally boiling. Myself and other representatives, particularly Black representatives, throughout the past few legislative sessions, we have repeatedly told him what his rhetoric was going to do. And that is exactly what transpired on yesterday. This is absurd. It's ridiculous. He is one of the causes to this. This is an agenda that he has been pushing since he has gotten into office. He showed us who he was when he initially ran for governor, saying, don't monkey this around, don't monkey this up. Those type of statements, it only leads to things like this.
Representative Nixon, I appreciate just so much emotion in what you're talking about. I can only imagine what you and your community are going through right now. And we know that before arriving at the Dollar General, the shooter briefly drove to Edward Waters University, a historically black school, calls itself Florida's first institution for the education of African Americans. How important is the school to that community, and what do you make of him going there and the fact that security stopped him and made sure that he left campus?
First of all, I want to give my condolences to the victims, the families of the victims. I am happy that security stepped up and did their job and were able to save lives. Look, again, we have leadership across this state, Republican leadership across this state, who are doing everything to continually attack Black lives, right? They are doing everything to erase Black history. They are feeding our children propaganda. All that does is lead to the devaluation of Black lives. This guy, he had no respect for the Black community. He had no respect. And my colleagues who are in leadership need to stand up and stop the mansplaining and the gaslighting and the misogynoir and the racist rhetoric that they spew time and time again on the House floor and the Senate chambers. Let's be clear. This is the same state legislature that just recently passed a bill to rename a portion of our roadways after Rush Limbaugh. That is what we're dealing with here in the state of Florida. That is why I am so angry. And then we have a very vindictive governor who, if we speak out, we're punished as elected officials. I, along with Representative McCurdy, sat on that House floor when he unconstitutionally came after 2 congressional Black districts to remove them. I was placed in a basement with rats because I stood up for my community. I am more than angry, and now there are 30 families that no longer have their family members to come home to. This is here in Florida. Governor DeSantis and the Republican Party of Florida are doing nothing but hurting us. And I am angry, and I will not continue to sit idly by.
Representative, we hear your words loud and clear, and we want to keep talking with you. The gunman used an AR-style rifle. We know that there's debate over whether to focus on this crisis at gun reform, the state level or nationally, or whether it's a mental health crisis or both. For states like Florida, where gun laws are really only ever loosened these days, and it feels like, and we know that Democrats are the minority in the state legislature, what do you look for change? I mean, do you feel like the answer's in Washington?
I feel like it has to be a top-down, bottom-up approach, right? I feel that all of the elected leaders need to come together and push out this hateful rhetoric, which has just been exacerbated since around 2015, 2016. I feel that our community members we need to hold us elected officials accountable. We work for you, right? We work for you, and you need to hold us accountable, not just at the ballot box, but year round. You need to push the policies that you deserve, right? And at the end of the day, we need common sense gun reform. We do, but also as elected officials, we need to be accountable for the words that come out of our mouths time and time again, for the policies that we push, for the communities and families that we are hurting. I have families calling me day in and day out saying they can no longer afford Florida. They do not feel safe. The NAACP issuing a travel advisory, that is real. That is what's happening in the state of Florida. And yet, time and time again, when I am on the House floor, when I am telling all the folks what's happening in our state, in the House floor from leaders, we get microaggressions. We get, that's not real. But again, you have governor who cares more about pandering to a base of voters, not even caring about what's happening here in our state of Florida and the 8,000 educator shortage that we have, right? The property insurance crisis that we're dealing with, the rising rent cost. No, he wants to be vindictive to black folks because it gives him points in poll numbers. That's what we're dealing with. America, you are in danger, girl. We must stop Ron DeSantis in his tracks. I am not an angry black woman. I am a woman who is speaking truth to power to let you all know this man means us no good. And it is evident by what transpired here yesterday in Jacksonville, Florida.
State Representative Angie Nixon, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.